For those of you just joining us, we have the opportunity today from hearing from Conference of Consulting Actuaries President Maria Sarli and President-elect Ellen Kleinstuber. Maria and Ellen, for this next segment, I want to talk a little bit more about women in the profession, in the actuarial profession. Over the course of your careers, what changes have you seen that have affected women, either positive or negative? Maria, I'll start with you.
Well, as I said, when I started, there were very few more senior women, but there were a lot of women who were coming up. And it really did change pretty quickly, so much so that when I was actually on maternity leave after about 10 years with the company, I got a call while I was on maternity leave telling me I had been made partner, even though no one had talked to me about it. I wasn't expecting it at all. The company was really going out of their way to try and reward women. And things kept changing even more than that because, as time went on, I loved that company and I probably would have stayed with it forever, but they got purchased by Coopers and Lybrand and then became part of PwC, and then Sarbanes-Oxley came along, and after Sarbanes-Oxley, PwC couldn't be auditing so many of its own clients, so the whole actuarial function was spun off. And I wound up leaving and going to Towers Parent in Atlanta. And when I got there, and this was 23 years into my career, this was about 2004, the Atlanta office at Towers Parent was really pretty interesting. It was headed by a woman, the office leader. Almost every single senior consultant in that office was a woman. And we used to have the opposite problem that people have. We used to worry about, getting enough male representatives on client teams because a lot of client teams would be a little upset with an all-female group, especially in the South. So that was our issue. But it was still kind of an unusual situation because most of those senior women were either single or a number of them had stay-at-home husbands. In fact, I became one of them after a year of being there. My husband stopped working because we had 4 children. So I think what really still needs to be done is getting to the point where both men and women, can have a career where they can devote enough time to it and have time for the family and their friends. And I think that's still the struggle and that's ongoing. But, for someone who's been in the profession for 40 years, I've seen tremendous change.
Awesome. Ellen, how about you?
Yeah, one of the things that I've struggled with over my career, as we talk about providing support for women in the actuarial profession and in business and making sure that we have the resources we need, is I really struggled with the idea that because I'm a woman, I need some sort of special help or special support. And that's something that really has kind of dogged me through my career. And I think some of it comes from, the pressure that women sometimes tend to put on themselves. We feel like we have to be superwoman, right? There's the message that women can do it all, and we can, right? There's nothing women can't do that if they don't set their minds to them, just like men and other demographics. But this idea that women should be able to effortlessly handle their career and a relationship and a household and the kids' activities and have a social life without having to make sacrifices really set up a high hurdle and this ideal for a lot of women that to try and chase after. And then we come up with the idea of, well, we need to provide special support. And I think now that I've come to realize that it's really just about understanding that everyone walks their own path through their life and through their career. And women maybe do need a different type of support or understanding of how they think differently, how they approach things differently. And that doesn't make it, I think the thing that I struggled with is the idea that somehow I was subpar or inferior. And that's not what it's saying. It's saying that really that, we each can have our own path to walk. And so I think the acknowledgement of differences between genders, between people of different races and nationalities, and that we really need to make an effort to understand where each person is coming from and what their background is, and what they might struggle with, to help people develop into their potential and have, kind of have all the things that they want and figure out how to balance and juggle that. I think that is a very positive, path that we're heading on, and a realization that we've had. So I think that for me, that's one of the biggest ones. And I think just now that people are starting to feel more empowered, that they can talk about what their challenges are and what they're dealing with and how that is affecting their professional lives. I think just some of that open and honest communication about the reality that we're all living with. And I think the CCA Women in Consulting community being launched and the success that that's seeing is an acknowledgement that, better or worse, women and men maybe walk in different shoes, and we all need our own types of support. Sometimes that support looks different, and that's okay. And I also like seeing that now we're starting to expand that type of dialogue into how we go about recruiting new people into the profession, and understanding that people take a different path to come to the profession, perhaps because of their background, or whether it's economic or racial, and starting to think differently about how we recruit so that we can continue to increase the diversity in the profession, and support everyone.
No, that's great. And we've had a couple of questions come in already on this. And for those of you, if you do have questions you want to submit, feel free to use the Q&A button down at the bottom of your screen to submit questions. But Ellen, one of the questions that came in directed at you, could you expand on your understanding and experience of how women think differently, as you just mentioned?
Yeah, so I'll give an example from, I don't know, I was maybe 6 or 7 years into my career, and a client had gone through a merger with another organization. And so we had just a ton of stuff going on. I've been working 12-hour days every day for months. I was traveling from Philly up to Boston 2 or 3 days a week to work on site at the client. And the folks that the client in Boston didn't especially want us there. They wanted to work with a different consultant, and we were foisted upon them. And then when I was back in the office, it was just grind for days at a time. So I knew that I was going to be in the office late, and I was going to need some programming support. And this was a time where we had a separate team of people who put evaluation software for it. It wasn't done by the actuarial teams. And so I went to my manager, who was also the lead on the case, and said, listen, I really need one of the programmers to stick around tonight and help me, because we're on this deadline and have to get this stuff done. And as background at the time, I was in my late 20s. I was a single woman. And the response I got was, well, I can't ask her to do that because she's married and she has a spouse and kids at home that need her. And I was just floored by that response. And full disclosure, my manager at the time was a man. And I really resented the situation and the response that was given. It's like, well, wait, why is it okay for me to work because I'm a single woman, but it's not okay for us to ask for her to put in a few extra hours because she's a married woman and has kids. And I think that with the benefit of years of hindsight on it, it's if there was a woman who was in that manager role, they, I think, may have understood both sides of the dynamic. And it's sort of an example of kind of that, the more old school way of viewing things. And I think we're seeing that type of dynamic change. And we're seeing that people, men and women, are starting to think differently about this and have that acknowledgement. Over the course of my career, in different situations, I have been accused of being weak. I've been called unprofessional. I've been told I was too emotional. And I was held back from promotions because of that. And now I've come to see that I'm not weak. And the fact that I get emotional about things doesn't make me weak. It doesn't make me a bad consultant or a bad manager or a bad leader. It makes me better. It just makes me different. And it's not to say that there are not males out there that are emotional at times and that are affected by frustrations at work. But I think men and women generally, right, again, making generalizations, see things differently, react to things differently, maybe internalize things differently. And there's a lot that we can learn from each other about how we then take those emotions and channel them to move forward towards a better solution. So I think that, again, it's some of the great things that are evolving just in business as well as in our profession about how we think about things and how we learn from each other.
No, that's great. Maria, another question that came in that I'll ask you to respond to. As you look at women that have started now into the profession, are there still challenges that they face by virtue of being a woman? Or have we really moved beyond a lot of those things that you've seen maybe from your early days of your career? Have we moved beyond some of those things in these last couple of decades?
I think we've moved beyond some things and not beyond others. I mean, this is a STEM field. This is math. And I think, early on, if you went back, there were people who believed that women couldn't do math as well, and therefore they couldn't be as good actuaries. And I don't think there's very much of that remaining. But I do think that women tend to be more the caregivers, not only of their own children, but of their elderly parents, things like that. And those outside of work responsibilities put greater pressure on women than men. Obviously, that's changing. It's getting a little more equal over time, but I still think there is a difference there. And therefore, I still think there are challenges that are kind of unique to women.
Ellen, how about you? Anything that you see on that front?
No, I think Maria covered that one pretty well. I mean, I agree with everything she said. There is a changing dynamic. I was so inspired by Michael and all of his great actuarial t-shirts. I went out and was on Amazon searching. I'm like, I gotta get some of these. And there was one that came up, and I still have to pull the trigger on ordering it. But it said, "I do math like a girl. Try to keep up." I think we are seeing that there's not, a big gender differential between mathematical abilities and consulting abilities. And it's more about seeing each person as an individual and what their strengths are. And you know what? Some of us are better at the technical actuarial math part of it, and some of us are better at the technical rules and legislation and regulation parts of it, and some of us are better at the strategic consulting part of it.
No, absolutely. I'll go back to something, Ellen, that I think you had touched on, but I'll have you two expand on it a little bit more. A lot of times you hear the stereotype that when you think about biases of women, such as being bossy versus being assertive, right? I think that's something you probably both have heard or experienced over the course of your careers. How do you deal with those type of stereotypes? Ellen, start with you, and then Maria, have you chime in after.
Yeah, I think I think this is a huge struggle for a lot of women. Boy, I don't know, how have I dealt with it? I think some of it is if you let the people that you're working with see that you have the belief that it's not all about you, right? But that it's about the team and their success. If you show that you care about them and their individual success and the success of the team and the success of the company or the organization or the committee, whatever it is that larger group is that you're kind of bubbling up to, I think that helps to overcome some of this idea that you're just being bossy and telling people what to do as opposed to you're asserting yourself. You build the credibility that you not just talk the talk, but that you can walk the walk as well. I think that helps with it. And I think we've come a long way in the actuarial profession, especially with moving away from just valuing the technical skills to really valuing the consulting and the interpersonal and the soft skills part of it. And so for some people, it may be doing a little bit of introspection or getting a coach to work with. If you are coming across as being bossy, as opposed to simply strong and competent and assertive, it's much more open now that people seek out that kind of coaching and support for how they can be the most effective communicator.
Yeah. Maria, how about you? What's your experience been?
Well, I think Ellen covered it pretty well. I mean, to me, it comes down to being collaborative. I think when you're collaborative, when you listen to other people's opinions, when you allow other people's opinions to change your own mind, that goes a long way toward having people not see you as bossy. And, I personally have always been kind of a shy person who doesn't speak up all that much. So I don't think I've had as much trouble being perceived as bossy as if I didn't have that trait.
Excellent.
Mm-hmm.
Ellen, you had you brought up the CCA's Women in Consulting Community Forum, which for those of you that aren't aware of that, the Women in Consulting Community is open to all actuaries. You don't even have to be a CCA member to be able to have access to that content. You can email Shannon Peterson to get access to that. But the Women in Consulting Community has tackled a lot of very engaging and important topics for women that are actuaries. Maria, I'll start with you on this one. What advice do you have for women within the profession?
I think two things. The first thing is take on things that scare you. I think there's some research that shows that men are much more willing to take on things that they don't really feel that they're completely ready for, but take them on anyway. And, it could be public speaking. It could be a particular client role. It could be leading a particular project. There are certain types of skills that you really only learn and hone by actually doing something that requires those skills. So sometimes you really just have to jump into the deep end and trust that you're not going to drown. You're going to make some mistakes along the way, but that's really how you're going to learn and grow and get better at the things that you're not already good at. The second thing I would probably say is, really strive hard to find balance. You have your career, you have your family, you have your friends, you have other outside interests. I know that as a young actuary, trying to make time for all those things, the thing that I let slide were friends. There were friends that, I had from college and earlier days that I just never made the time to keep up with. And I regret doing that now. It's hard with all the pressures that you have, but, trying to make time for all those four critical areas. You're not just an actuary, you're a person, and you really need to pay attention to all those areas.
Ellen, how about you? What advice do you have for women within the profession?
Yeah, I gotta say, Maria, your comment about sort of making the choices and your friendships being one of the things that you let slip, that kind of just hit home with me for a minute. Maria just did a really nice job with kind of summarizing a lot of the same things that I have, so I'll try to maybe just expand a little bit. Being honest with yourself about what you do and don't want from your professional life, I think is a good place to start. And I'll expand, I even say that to say what you are and are not willing to do, right? How willing are you to take on that thing that scares you that Maria talked about? But when you have that conversation with yourself and you really think about what it is you do and don't want to do, or get out of your career, then you put yourself in a position to take advantage of opportunities when they come knocking. And then take that leap of faith that Maria talked about. I would also say, honor the things that make you different than your coworkers. Find and cultivate the skills or the abilities that are your strengths, and that you want to use to define what your personal brand is or your professional brand is. And let it be okay with you that that's not the same as the person next to you. And then I would also say, and I struggled with this one every day, I think Maria touched on it too, as early in your career as you can, figure out how you get control over your schedule, and how you're going to manage to both separate and integrate your personal and work time. And then once you find that balance, be fiercely protective of whatever it is, because when it gets out of whack, it can be just an uphill battle, a daily uphill battle to try and get it back. So.
All right.